السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. محاضرة اليوم أو today's lecture we are going to talk about cost and concepts that are relevant to make decisions, economical decisions. A simple example is let's talk about the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus. The price of the iPhone 6 when it was released was $649, while the 6 Plus was $749. If we know that the cost of manufacturing the iPhone 6 is $200.1 and the cost of 6 Plus is just $15.5 more. So the question is how Apple decided the selling price for both versions, the 6 and 6 Plus. And the other question is how Apple come up with an estimate for the cost or the cost components of both products, the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus. To answer these questions first, we should know or we should learn how we classify cost. كيف احنا بنقسم الكوست. الآن الكوست أو التكلفة are divided into or we can classify them as manufacturing and non-manufacturing cost. التكلفة التصنيعية والتكلفة الغير التصنيعية. Manufacturing cost is any cost that are related to manufacturing the product or giving the service. التكلفة التصنيعية هي أي تكلفة لها علاقة في إنتاج البرودكت أو تقديم الخدمة. And it has three components. في إلها ثلاث عناصر: the direct raw materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead. تكلفة المواد المباشرة والعمالة المباشرة والmanufacturing overhead، الأوفرهيد التصنيعي. Raw materials أو direct raw materials is every material that can be traced back to the final product, used and traced back to the final product. هي كل شيء أنا بستخدمه بقدر أتبعه إلى المنتج النهائي. Direct labor تكلفة الأعمال المباشرة is the cost of labor that are involved directly in producing the product or giving the service. تكلفة العمالة أو الأشخاص اللي بيشتغلوا يشتغلون بشكل مباشر لإنتاج البرودكت أو تقديم الخدمة. الآن manufacturing overhead is anything else related to manufacturing other than direct material and direct labor. manufacturing overhead هي أي شيء له علاقة في العملية التصنيعية لكن لا هو direct material ولا هو direct labor. أمثلة عليها اللي مسميهم إحنا indirect material and indirect labor: maintenance, repairs for manufacturing equipment, heat and light used in the production area, property tax, depreciation, insurance for the manufacturing facilities, and overtime premiums for manufacturing labor. يعني كل إشي صيانة الأجهزة المعدات المستخدمة في الإنتاج، الإضاءة والتدفئة اللي بنستخدمها في صالات الإنتاج، الضرائب depreciation والتأمين على معدات الإنتاج، والعمل الإضافي اللي أنا بدفعها للأشخاص اللي بينتجوا البرودكت. الآن indirect materials and indirect labor. For indirect labor sometimes we need labor that are not directly involved in the production. احنا بحاجة للموظفين أو لعمالة لكن هذول الموظفين أو الأشخاص ما بينتجوا البرودكت بإيديهم. They do not make the product with their hands but their presence is essential for the production. وجودهم ضروري لعملية الإنتاج. For example, the handlers who bring raw materials from warehouses to production area and take the finished product from production area to warehouses. اللي بيجيبوا المواد الخام من المستودع إلى صالة الإنتاج، بياخذوا المنتج النهائي من صالة الإنتاج إلى المستودع. Their presence is essential. Without raw materials in the production area we cannot produce. إذا ما جبنا المواد الخام لصالة الإنتاج ما راح نقدر ننتج. فهذول helpers their presence is essential for the production process but they are not involved in directly in producing the product. For another example is production supervisors, مشرفي الإنتاج. Their presence is essential for the production, to organize the production process, but they are not involved directly in the production process itself. Indirect materials, in some cases we use raw materials in very small quantities for one product. For example, the glue used in books or the staples used in producing books. We are using them in very, very, very small amounts. So it's not practical to it's not practical to classify them as to classify them as direct raw materials, because their contribution to the one to a single product is very small. Therefore, we are just summing them up as indirect raw materials. The other classification is the non-manufacturing cost. التكلفة الغير تصنيعية. Every cost that we pay that is not related to the manufacturing process. كل cost احنا بندفعها بس ما لها علاقة في عملية التصنيع. It is more related to marketing and advertising activities of the company. It has three items: non-manufacturing overhead, marketing cost, and administrative functions cost. Non-manufacturing overhead, for example, heat and light used in the offices. الكهرباء والتدفئة اللي أنا بستخدمها في المكاتب. Okay, it is different from heat and light used for the manufacturing area. يعني الإضاءة الكهرباء اللي تستهلك في مكتب المدير والمكاتب, it's not a manufacturing cost, it is non-manufacturing cost. Tax, depreciation associated with the company, يعني tax depreciation for non-manufacturing equipment. تمام. selling and administrative functions. Marketing, everything I pay for marketing purposes, organization and clerical costs associated with sales activities. رواتب sales persons, salaries of sales persons, موظفي المبيعات, الأشياء اللي بيستخدمها موظفي المبيعات. For example, if I'm using cars for marketing, for distributing my products, if I'm using my own cars, اللي هي سيارات التوزيع. Administrative functions, الوظائف الإدارية. For example, general accounting, المحاسبين, secretariat مع السكرتارية. And for example, managers, executive managers, المدراء التنفيذيين, رواتبهم, their salaries are classified as administrative functions. This classification is used for general purposes, but for financial statement purposes, we have another classification. Depends on the matching concept. The matching concept states that the cost is considered as a cost once it is incurred. And therefore we have two classifications: period cost and product cost. Period cost that I have to pay on periodic basis. And every non-manufacturing cost is classified as period cost. For example, if I'm renting my building, rents, electricity, electrical power consumption, taxes, all of them are classified as period cost. Product cost is any cost related to product. So this is equivalent to manufacturing cost. And for product cost, the idea for product cost is all of the costs I'm spending to produce a product. كل التكاليف اللي أنا بستخدمها أو كل المصاريف اللي أنا بدفعها لإنتاج البرودكت, all the expenses I'm paying to produce a product are not considered as a cost as long as I'm still having the product in my warehouses. ما بعتبرها cost طول ما المنتج عندي موجود في المستودعات. أنا أنتجته حطيته في المستودع. طول ما هو موجود في المستودع, as long as the finished product exists in my warehouses, it is not considered as a cost. It is considered as a asset or inventory. Sometimes we call it inventory. It is considered or classified as a cost once I sell the finished product. مجرد ما بعته الآن عندي في financial statement أو balance sheet, it appears as a cost. Okay? As a product cost. As long as I have it in my warehouses, it is not classified as cost. Once I sell it, the cost will appear in the financial statement. If it is not sold, it will appear as inventory or asset in the financial statement. And this diagram or this graph shows me the relation between the income statement and balance sheet and the inventory and cost. or when the inventory is classified as cost in the income statement. Okay, example 8.1 is about ice cream shop, and we want to see how the cost for one ice cream cone is classified. A typical ice cream shop in Washington, D.C., the annual sales volume is 185 cones per year. The revenue is $462,000. The table shows the unit price of an ice cream cone and the costs that go into producing the product. We want to classify them as product and period cost, and in the table it shows the different elements or the different cost elements: ice cream, cream, sugar, milk, and milk. It costs $120,000 per year. Cone or the biscuit cost $9,250 per year. الأجار rent 112,000. wages 46,000. payroll tax ضريبة الرواتب 9,250. sales tax ضريبة المبيعات 42,000. business tax ضريبة المبيعات ضريبة البزنس similar to يعني الترخيص أو الرسوم الرخصة 14,000. debt service 42,000. supplies, utilities, other expenses, and this is the profit. And this is the unit price or the unit cost. It's just 120,000 divided by 185,000. So, product cost. Product cost, every manufacturing cost is classified as a product cost. So we have direct material, ice cream and cones. We have wages, direct labor, and we have manufacturing overhead, supplies, and utilities. We mean by supplies like things that I use in my final product, like for example paper tissues, for example boxes. Okay, utilities is the power cost for production equipment like refrigerators، الثلاجات الموجودة في الايس كريم شوب، الكهرباء اللي بتستهلكها الثلاجات. electricity consumed by refrigerators is ايش؟ and manufacturing cost, and therefore it is a product cost. For period cost, anything that I have to pay periodically. I have payroll taxes like payroll, sales, and business taxes. I have rent and other expenses as operating expenses, and debt, of course. So the total product cost is $207,200. The total period cost is $231,250. 231,250. Now we have also another classification. This classification is more relevant to decision making. التصنيف الثالث له علاقة الآن أكثر في عملية اتخاذ القرارات based on cost. We have what we call a cost behavior. Cost behavior describes how cost changes with volume index. كيف بتتغير عندي الكوست بالvolume index. And if you remember volume index from annual equivalent or the annual volume, we call it the annual volume. Volume index is any measurable volume that is directly related to the business activity that influence ايش the amount of cost. قيمة إلها علاقة في البزنس activity something or measurable volume، إشي أنا بقدر أقيسه that is related to business activity، حجم النشاط that have a strong influence on the cost، إلها تأثير مباشر على الكوست. Examples for volume index, it can be kilometers traveled by a car، عدد الكيلومترات اللي بتمشيها السيارة. Operating hours for a machine، عدد الساعات اللي بيشتغلها الماشين. It can be production output، كم وحدة أنا بنتج، how many iPhones or tablets I produce. For example, if I'm using a power generation plant، محطة توليد كهرباء، how many kilowatts the plant is generating. Okay, all of them are can be used as volume index. All of them is a measure for the business activity, تمام, and all of them have a strong influence on the cost. So from this point of view, I can classify cost to three categories: fixed, variable, and mixed cost. Fixed cost, that the cost that doesn't change with the volume index. بغض النظر أنا شو أنتجت، شو بعت، شو عملت, it will remain constant regardless of how many units I'm producing, how many kilometers I'm driving, how many kilowatt hour I'm producing of electricity. It remains constant. This is for the basic operation of the company. Examples like insurance, tax, rent, depreciation of buildings, of machinery and equipment, and also salaries of non-direct labor. All of them classified as fixed cost, تكلفة ثابتة. Variable cost, the variable that depends on the business level. It can increase or decrease with volume index, depends on the relation between the cost and the volume index. Examples for variable cost are like direct labor and direct material. العمالة المباشرة والمواد الخام المباشرة. Depends on the volume index. For example, if I'm producing 1000 tablets, I need certain amount of raw materials and I need a certain amount of direct labor. If I'm going to produce 10,000, I will need more raw materials and I will need more labor. So the salaries of the direct labor and the cost of the raw materials changes with the volume index. The third type, which is mixed cost. In mixed cost, it has two components. One of them is fixed, doesn't change with the volume index, and the other part is changing with the volume index, depends on the volume index. An example for it, like the depreciation of a car, or the loss, depreciation is the loss of value of car. Depreciation of a car. One part of depreciation is due to time, which is fixed. For example, a car will lose 5,000 each year of its value because of time. And the variable part is the kilometers traveled. For example, a car that has traveled 10,000 kilometers have different value than a car that has traveled 50,000 kilometers. So the variable part depends on the kilometers traveled. The more the car is used or traveled, the more it will lose from its value. So a depreciation of a car is an example of a mixed cost. Part of it is fixed due to time, the loss of the value due to time, which is fixed, and the other part is the loss of value due to the miles or kilometers traveled by a car. Okay, now we have another concept, which is the average unit cost. The average unit cost is the cost per unit basis. So the cost behaviors now is different. So a fixed cost varies with change in volume index. A variable cost per unit is constant, and a mixed cost have two components. One of them is constant and one of them is variable. So the fixed cost per unit is changing with changes in volume index, and the variable cost remains constant. How to explain that? Let's take an example. For example, the rent. I'm paying a rent of 10,000 riyals per year. بدفع أجار مقداره 10,000 ريال بالسنة, for example. Okay? And if my plant is producing 1,000 units, okay, this is a fixed cost, by the way. So if I'm producing 1,000 units, so the cost per unit or the rent per unit, 10,000 divided by 1,000 units is going to be 10 riyals per unit. If I'm producing, let's say 10,000 units, so the rent per unit is going to be 10,000 divided by 10,000, which is going to be 1 riyal per unit. The more I produce, the cost per unit or the rent per unit decreases. This is why the fixed cost per unit varies with the change in volume index. Okay. Example 8.2. The table shows the operating and ownership cost associated with driving a car, okay, as variable and as fixed, variable, and mixed cost. We want to develop a cost volume chart and calculate the average cost per mile as a function of the annual mileage. Here we have the variable cost, fuel, maintenance, tires, and this is the total variable cost, which is $0.2375 per mile. Okay, because it's variable, it should be per mile. It depends on the miles traveled. The fixed cost is insurance, تأمين, license, registration and taxes, finance charge, and this is the total fixed cost. And notice that the total fixed cost doesn't depend on the miles traveled. Now we have a mixed cost, which is depreciation. We have a fixed portion of depreciation for if every 15,000 traveled by the car, 15,000 miles traveled by the car will lose $4,578 of its value. And the variable portion for any mile above the 15,000, the car will lose of $0.213 per mile. So here we have the volume index starting from 15,000 to 20,000, and we have now the variable cost. The variable cost for the first 15,000 is going to be 0.2375 multiplied by 15,000, 3,563, and the same for 16,000, which is 0.2375 multiplied by 16,000 for the 17,000 multiplied by 17,000, and so on. And this fixed cost, it doesn't depend on the volume index, it will remain constant. Now we come to depreciation. Okay, for depreciation, the fixed part is constant for the first 15,000 miles. Okay, any mile more than the 15,000, it will cost $0.231. $0.2310 for every mile greater than the 15,000. So at 15,000, the variable portion is 0. For the next 1,000 miles, it's going to be 0.231 multiplied by 1,000 miles. For an extra 2,000 miles, 0.231 multiplied by 2,000 multiplied by 3,000 multiplied by 4,000 multiplied by 5,000 miles. Okay, and this is the summation of total variable cost plus variable cost, the summation of total cost, this and this, and this is the total cost as function of miles. So for 15,000 miles, the total cost is 11,000. For 16,000 miles, the total cost is 11. For 89. For 17,000, 11,940, and so on. And here we see is the cost per unit. And as you can see, as we travel more, the cost per unit decreases. Okay, for 15,000 miles, the cost per unit is 0.7359. But if we use the car, if we drive the car 20,000 miles, the cost per unit is less, because the fixed cost now have a greater contribution than the variable cost. يعني كل ما مشت السيارة أكثر، تمام، الكوست بير يونت عندي حتقل. And the chart here, those chart that summarizes the data presented in tables. And this summary for the cost, the full cost concept. It is direct material, okay, and direct labor. We add to it prime cost and overhead cost, okay. We add to them production cost and selling cost and general administrative cost and then we will have the full cost. Direct material, direct labor, prime cost, manufacturing overhead, full production cost, which is this is the production cost, and we have selling cost and administrative cost, okay, and this is the product cost, and this is the non-manufacturing cost. Now we come to cost volume profit analysis. For any business, okay, or to measure the profitability of any business, we need to consider what we call a marginal revenue and the marginal cost. So the purpose of the company is to maximize its profit. And the company is making a profit as long as its marginal revenue exceeds its marginal cost. And what we mean by marginal revenue and marginal cost is the revenue per unit and the cost per unit. And the purpose or the goal of any company is to maximize its profit per unit of output. And this we can summarize it in the following slide. So for any business, the company should know what we call it the total revenue function, TR, and the total cost function. Both of them are non-linear functions with the volume index X. So let's suppose that the total revenue function is given by this equation as a function of the volume index X, and the total cost function is given by this equation as a function of the volume index X. The profit function is total revenue minus total cost. The net profit is the total revenue minus the total cost. And as a function of X is going to be 330x minus 6x squared minus 300 minus 20x minus 5x squared minus 0.5x cubed, and this is the final equation. هاي هي المعادلة النهائية اللي هي معادلة التوتال ريفينيو ناقص معادلة التوتال كوست. هاي حتعطيني البروفيت function. This is called the profit function. Now, as a company, كشركة, I should know two things. The volume index that gives maximum profit, and the volume index or the break-even volume index that makes the total revenue equals total cost. Okay, those are the two basic things any company should know about its business. لازم تعرف الفوليوم index اللي بخليها تحقق أعلى ربح, the maximum profit, and the volume index where it makes no profit. The profit is zero, or total revenue equals to total cost. For the first part, maximum profit, how to find the maximum profit is by finding the derivative of the profit function equal to 0 and solve it for x. So the optimal x for our example is 13,720 units. The unit, if the company produces and sells 13,720 units, this means it will generate the maximum profit. So what happens if it produces less than 13,000, let's say for example 10,000, it still generates a profit, but it's not going to be 13,000. It will be less, it's not going to be the optimal profit. It's going to be less. What if the company produces more than 13,000? Of course it will sell more, يعني راح revenue, of course the revenue will increase and revenue راح يزيد, but the total cost also will increase. So the net profit is going to decrease if to produce, for example, 15,000 units. And this summarizes the previous example. This is the total revenue function as a function of volume index, and this is the total cost function. And as you can see, the total revenue increases as the volume index increases. the total cost for a certain level, somehow it's constant, but after a certain level you notice that the total cost function increases faster as the volume index increase. And we have the profit, total profit. And as you can see, there's a certain volume index that gives a maximum profit. The purpose for any company is to keep its production level around the optimum volume index. الهدف لأي شركة إنها تخلي الإنتاج تبعها أو معدل الإنتاج تبعها حوالين الأوبتيمم volume index to have maximum profit. Now for the break-even analysis, we just equal TR to TC, total revenue equals total cost, and solve the equations for X to find the break-even volume index اللي بخلي الشركة لا بتربح ولا بتخسر، يعني البروفيت تبعها بيساوي زيرو. And every company should know its break-even volume index. Sometimes it's not economical to produce it's of course not sometimes, it is always not economical to produce less or lower than the break even. This means if I'm producing at a rate lower than the break even, this means I'm losing money، أنا قاعد بخسر، لأنه حيصير عندي total cost أكبر من total revenue. فبالتالي الشركة لازم تعرف نقطة التعادل تبعتها لحتى دائما تحاول إنها تكون بعيدة قدر الإمكان عن نقطة التعادل. Once the company reaches the break even point, this means the company is not making a profit، مش قاعدة تعمل profit. If it produces less than break even, this means that the company is losing money and they should consider stopping the business. Now we'll take like a simple case for total revenue or total cost functions. We will assume a linear relations between the total revenue and total cost with volume index. The total revenue function can be expressed as P multiplied by X, and the total cost function is V multiplied by X plus F. B is the selling price per unit. Logically, the total revenue is selling price per unit multiplied by the number of units sold مضروب بعدد اليونتس اللي أنا بعتها أو my volume index. And the total cost function is the variable cost per unit multiplied by volume index plus the fixed cost. This is the total cost. To reach break even, this means TR equal TC, or the profit equals 0, and solving the previous equation, TR equals TC, total revenue equals total cost. The break even volume is F, the fixed cost, divided by the selling price per unit minus the variable price per unit. Or we can find the break even sales، معدل المبيعات اللي بخليني أنا متعادل، تمام، اللي هو الريفينيو، the break even revenue equals PF over B minus V, or rearranging the equation we will get this equation. This P minus V, we call it marginal contribution, and 1 minus F over B, it is called marginal contribution rate, and both of them have different applications for business or decision making. Example 8.3, the Bragg Staten Company manufactures a specialized motor for chainsaw. The company expects to manufacture and sell 30,000 motors in year 2015. It can manufacture an additional 10,000 motors without adding new machinery and equipment. Bragg and Stratton's projected total cost for 30,000 units are given in the table below, and the selling price for the motor is $80. Okay, شركة تنتج وبتبيع التشين سو، معطيني في الجدول اللي هي total الكوست for 30,000 units. الكوست الكلاسيفيكيشن of cost for producing and selling 30,000 units. اوكي، وبحكي لي انه كمان بيقدروا ينتجوا كمان 10,000 يونت زياده بدون اضافه اي ماشينري زياده. بس انتبهوا الان، المعلومات المعطاه عندي في الجدول is for 30,000 units. Now what's required is the total manufacturing cost per unit if I'm producing 30,000 units, the manufacturing cost per unit if I'm producing 40,000 units, contribution margin for the motor, okay, and what's the break-even sales volume, what's the break-even price on the motors if the firm is looking for 30,000 profit before tax. For part A, the manufacturing cost. The manufacturing cost is direct material, direct labor, and the manufacturing overhead. Those are the manufacturing cost. So the cost per unit is the summation of them divided by 30,000 units. So the manufacturing cost for producing 30,000 is $21 per unit. Now, the manufacturing cost if I'm producing 40,000 units. For producing 30,000 units, I have an extra of 10,000 units now. So now I have to consider the variable part and the fixed part. The variable part of producing the 30,000 units is this part. This is the variable part. So 15,000 plus 150,000 plus 300 plus 100,000 divided by 30. This is the variable cost per unit. If I multiply it by 40,000, this is the total variable cost for producing 40,000 units, plus 80,000, which is the fixed cost. So this is the total cost for producing 40,000 units. If I divide it by 40,000 units, I will get 20.3. Okay, this is the variable cost per unit, and this is the fixed cost. So the total, unit cost for producing 40,000 is 20.3. It's clear that if I increase the production rate, the manufacturing cost decreases per unit. The manufacturing cost per unit decreases. Now, break-even sales volume. The break-even is the fixed cost divided by selling price minus variable cost per unit. So the fixed cost is 80,000 and 70,000. The selling price, okay, where is the selling price? The selling price is $80, okay? Minus 24.3. From where we got 24.3, is the variable cost per unit. This part the variable cost per unit, which is this part and this plus this divided by 30. Okay, so the break-even sales volume is $2,695. The marginal contribution, the contribution margin for the motor is as follows. This is the variable cost part, this is the selling price. So P minus V is 80 minus 24.3, which is 55.67 per unit. And the break-even is the break-even price, which is going to be the break-even price on the motors if the firm wants to make a $30,000 profit, which is going to be the manufacturing cost for 30,000 plus the non-manufacturing cost plus the expected profit. This is the non-manufacturing cost. 25,000 divided by 30,000 units, which is going to be $39 per unit if I want a minimum of a profit of 300,000. Now for decision making. In making a decision that depends on the cost, uh, it's worth to mention that those decisions are short term decisions. يعني هاي القرارات احنا بنتخذها على short term, not for the long term. And the classification of cost we saw that are historical data in nature, يعني بتعطيني الهيستوري تبع الداتا. الآن making decisions I want to predict the future and plan for the future. So we need different type of data, okay, to make decisions or to compare between alternatives based on cost, okay, to make a decision. Therefore, we have three different types of data or data that we need, like the differential cost and revenue, which is the difference in total cost and revenue, the cost of opportunity, the potential cost of giving up an option or seek an alternative. يعني تكلفة الفرصة, for example, sometimes if you not take a chance, it doesn't mean that you are losing money directly, but you are losing the opportunity of making more money. انت قاعد تخسر فرصة انك تعمل فلوس اكثر. And this from financial or economical point of view, it is a loss. Sunk cost, the cost history or the cost has that already been incurred, which is in the past and has no relevant for making decisions. And finally, the marginal cost, added cost that result from increasing rates of output, usually by a single unit. And in making decisions, we have different situations: differential cost and revenue, or making decisions based on the differential cost and revenue. In comparing between two alternatives, اللي عم نيجي نقارن بين خيارين، تمام، we are only interested in the ايش؟ difference in cost. احنا مهتمين فقط في ايش؟ في الفرق في الكوست والفرق في الريفينيو ما بين هاي alternatives. We are interested on the differences in cost and revenue between the alternatives. Things that are constant we are not interested in. الاشياء اللي بتضلها ثابته ما بندخلها في حساباتنا. احنا مهتم في الاشياء اللي بتعمل لي ايش؟ differences، فروقات. And we have two cases in this category: method change and operations planning. The first example for method change. في عندي أنا شركة engineering department at an auto parts manufacturer recommends that the current dies, the base case, are replaced with higher quality dies, اللي هو alternative, which would result in substantial savings in manufacturing cost. One of the company's products, the higher cost of material would be more than offset by the savings in machine time and electricity. It is if estimated monthly cost of the two alternatives are shown in the table. What is the differential cost of going with better dies؟ شركة بتصنع، خلينا نحكي شركة مجال تصنيعها في البلاستيك، الأجزاء البلاستيكية اللي بيستخدموها في السيارات، وبتعرفوا لحتى يعطوا البلاستيك لون بيستخدموا نوع معين من الأصباغ. They use certain type of dyes. Now they are using certain type of dyes. This requires adding more quantity of the dye to have the desired color. بيضطروا انه يضيفوا كميات كبيرة شوي من هاي الأصباغ لحتى يحصلوا اللون المعين. And the machine or the use of machine is more. يعني حيستخدموا كمان الميكسينج ماشينز حيستخدموها بشكل أكبر لحتى يوصلوا للدرجة المطلوبة من اللون. This is the base case. The alternative is that they are used a higher quality dyes، انهم يستخدموا اصباغ الجودة تبعتها اعلى، فبالتالي حيستخدموا كمية اقل لحتى يحصلوا على نفس درجة اللون. حيستخدموا المعدات تبعتهم بشكل اقل، يعني حيوفروا في استخدام الكهرباء لحتى كمان يوصلوا لنفس درجة اللون to reach the same level or the same intensity of color. And the table summarizes the cost for both options. Now, the cost of material for the current dyes is $150,000. For the bitter dyes, it will cost more, $170,000. Labor, $85,000. For the bitter dye 64, they will need less labor because they will reach the required color level with less labor. Electricity costs 73,000 and 66,000. Now for the fixed part or the fixed cost, supervision costs 25, taxes 16,000, depreciation 40,000 and 43,000 depreciation. The depreciation is different between the two cases because the machine will be used less in the second option. And this is the total cost. So now for making the decision, I'm interested in the difference between the two alternatives. I'm not interested with anything that remains constant. So, and the difference, how we calculate the difference, the alternative minus the base case. تمام. And you can define it the other way. يعني احنا كيف بنعرفها؟ اللي هو الالترناتيف ناقص البيز كيس، البديل ناقص الوضع الحالي. And you can define it the other way, but you have to pay attention for the signs. So if we define it in this way, the alternative minus the base case, or the option minus the base case, I will have savings. I will have extra cost in raw materials, which is 20,000. I will have savings in machine labor of $21,000. I will have savings of $7,000 in electricity, no change for supervision and taxes, so they are not considered. And I will have more cost in depreciation, which is $3,000. So the summation, 20,000 minus 21 minus 7 plus 3,000 minus $5,000. So what does this mean? I'm saving $5,000 in this case. So going with bitter dyes is more profitable, or the more economical than keeping the current situation, because I'm saving $5,000. Another example for operations planning. We have company, Stanton Corporation. They have a manufacturing plant. They are working a single shift 5 days a week. The plant is operating, can produce at full capacity 24,000 units per week, okay, without any overtime or extra shift. بيقدروا ينتجوا ل 24,000 حبة بالأسبوع بدون ما يدفعوا اوفر تايم أو يجيبوا شفت زيادة. طبعا بيشتغلوا 5 أيام بالأسبوع، شفت واحد في اليوم، okay. Fixed cost for a single shift is $90,000. The average variable cost is a constant of $30 per unit, okay, for a total output rate of $24,000 a week. يعني تكلفة إنتاج الحبة الواحدة $30 إذا بنتجوا 24,000 حبة بالأسبوع. The company has received now an order to produce an extra 4,000 units per week. لأن أجاهم طلب بدهم إيش ينتجوا 4,000 حبة زيادة فوق ال 24,000. Okay. Two options are being considered. في عندهم الآن خيارين لحتى إيش يقدروا ينتجوا هال 4,000 حبة الزيادة بالأسبوع. The first option increase the plant's output to 36,000 units per week, okay, by adding overtime Saturday. إنهم يجيبوا الموظفين يوم الأجازة اللي هو يوم السبت ويدفعوا لهم overtime. الآن there is no increase in the fixed cost, okay, and the variable cost now is 36 per unit for any unit more than the 24,000 units. يعني الآن ما في تغيير عندي في fixed cost, there is no change in the fixed cost, but any unit produced more than 24,000 units is going to cost $36 per unit. The other option is to have a second shift, okay. The maximum capacity of the second shift is 20,000 units per week, and the variable cost will now increase, will be $31.5 per unit. And the operation, this is the unit cost for the second shift, and the operation cost of the second shift will be a $13,500 per week. Now, which option is more profitable, and at what production rate that will make option 2 is more profitable. Now, to analyzing the problem. الاوبريتنج كوست التكلفة التشغيلية for the first shift operation will remain unchanged for both options. يعني التكلفة التشغيلية للشفت الأول كونه مشترك بين التو options راح ايش مالها تضلها ثابتة ما راح تتغير. And therefore we can exclude it from our decision. نقدر نستثني البيس كيس من القرار تبعنا. Therefore any cost that is left or any cost more than the cost of the first shift is going to be considered in the analysis. راح نعتبر اي cost اضافيه على تكلفه الشفت الاول هي هاي فقط اللي راح ناخذها بعين الاعتبار في التحليل تبعنا. So خلينا نسمي let's Q represents the additional cost the additional volume index اللي هي الكميه الزياده اللي انا بدي انتجها. Okay? And for the first shift the cost for the first shift is cost per unit multiplied by the volume index. This is the cost of the first option. For the second option, it's going to be cost per unit multiplied by the volume index plus ايش the fixed cost of the second shift. Note that for the second shift the fixed cost is different from the first shift. التكلفة الثابتة للشفت الثاني 13,500. But for the first option the fixed cost is the same as the first shift. فبالتالي we do not need to consider it in our analysis. So now we have two equations. We can find the break-even Q volume that makes both options the same or the cost of the two options the same لأن نقدر نطلع Q break even نقطة التعادل اللي هي بتخلي لي الكوست للخيارين متساوية. اوكي إذا حليناها راح نلاقي إنه the break even volume index that makes the two options equal or the cost of the two options equals is 3000 units 3000 حبة. يعني إذا أنا أنتجت 3000 حبة بالأسبوع الكوست للأوبشن الأول هي نفسها الكوست للأوبشن الثاني. So at what volume index or at what production volume makes the second shift more profitable? For example, if I produce 1000 units, or we can see it by examining the following graph. This is the cost of the first option and this is the cost of the second option. And as you can see, this is the break-even volume, 3000. So any cost or any production volume greater than 3000, the cost of the second option is higher. The cost of the first option is higher. أي كمية أنا بنتجها أكثر من 3000 حتكون عندي تكلفة الخيار الأول أعلى، وأي كمية بنتجها أقل من 3000 حتكون عندي الكوست للسكند اوبشن أقل. And let's take an example. If I'm producing, let's say, 5,000 units. Let's assume that I'm going to produce 5,000 units. The cost for the first option is going to be 36 multiplied by 5,000. Which is going to be 180,000. For the second option, if I'm producing 5,000, it's going to be 13,500 plus 31.5 multiplied by 5,000, which is going to be plus 31.5 multiplied by 5,000, which is going to be $171,000. So it's clear that any cost greater than $3,000 or any volume greater than 3000 units will make the second option more profitable or more economical. If I'm producing less than 3000, let's say for example 1000, this is going to be $36, $36,000, and is going to be 45. If I'm producing less than 3000, we took 1000 units. If I'm producing 1000 units, the cost of the first option is going to be 36, and the cost of the second option is going to be $45,000. So any production volume greater than 3000 will make option 2 more economical. Any production volume less than 3000 will make option 1 more economical. In our case, we want to produce 4000 units, extra 4000 units. So the best option is option 2. The cost of option 2 is less than the cost of option 1 for producing 4000 units. Now to the opportunity cost. The opportunity cost in simple way يعني تكلفة الفرص الضائعة. It's a potential benefit. If I'm giving up this potential benefit, إذا أنا بترك هاي potential benefit, it is considered as a cost. إذا أنا ما استغليت الفرصة هاي والفرصة ضاعت مني, I'm losing the opportunity of gaining more profit or of gaining money or more money or making money. And I'm losing the contribution of this opportunity to my income. Okay? An example. Benson Company is a farm equipment. They are manufacturing 20,000 units of gas filters annually for the use in lawn mowers. Lawn mowers اللي بيستخدموها الآلات اللي بيستخدموها لقص الأعشاب. And they have a plant for producing lawn mowers, and they have a plant for producing gas filters. اللي بحطوها على اللون اللي بيستخدموها في اللون مور. الآن the expected annual production cost for the gas filters is summarized in the given table. Now, another company called Tompkins Company, they are specialized in producing gas filters, and they are offering to Benson Company, وبيعرضوا على شركة بنسون إنهم يزودوهم ب20,000 فلتر بالسنة اللي بتحتاجها هاي الشركة to provide them with 20,000 filters per year, okay, for $17 per unit. إنه يزودوهم بالفلاتر اللي بيحتاجوها وحيبيعوهم الفلتر الواحد $17. Okay, if Benson accepts the offer, إذا بنسون فكرت إنها بدها تقبل العرض, okay, and the plant used for producing the gas filters is going to be rented to a third party, وبدهم يأجروا المصنع اللي بيستخدموه لإنتاج الفلترز لشركة أخرى, وحيدفعوا لهم annual rent of $35,000. Should Benson accept the offer or reject it, and why? Okay, now how is this an opportunity or cost of opportunity? If Benson decides to produce the gas filters by themselves, then they are going to lose the opportunity of having $35,000 per year, the rent of the plant used for gas filters. يعني إذا قرروا إنهم يستمروا في إنتاج الفلاتر بأنفسهم, حيضيعوا على حالهم فرصة إنهم يأجروا مصنع الجاز فلترز $35,000 بالسنة. If they decide to buy the filters, then they are going to have the opportunity of gaining $35,000. إذا قرروا إنهم يشتروا الفلاتر, الآن عندهم فرصة إنهم يدخلوا على حالهم $35,000 بالسنة. So what we are going to make a differential cost analysis. Okay, remember that we are interested only in the difference in cost and revenue. Okay, for the make option, this is the cost of direct material, cost of direct labor, cost of power. Okay, there is no cost of gas filters because they are producing them, they are not buying them. Heat and light, depreciation, and as you can see, we added the rent of, or the potential rent as a cost for the make option, because if I decide to keep producing the gas filters, I'm losing this opportunity. I'm losing the $35,000. So it's going to be a cost for the make option. For the buy option, I have no direct labor or direct material or manufacturing overhead. I will only have the cost of filters, which is 20,000 multiplied by $17 per unit. Okay, heat and light, I'm going to keep paying heat and light and depreciation for the equipment. Okay, so making a differential analysis, the make option minus the buy option, 100, 190, 35 minus $340, no change in fixed cost, so 35, which is the cost of lost opportunity. So in total, the total cost is $20,000. So what does this mean? It means that the buy option is less by $20,000 from the make option. يعني الباي option هيوفر علي 20,000. The buy option will save me $20,000. Okay, so and if you can see, the total cost is for 80,000 and the total cost is for 60,000. The buy option is less in cost than the make option because of the cost of opportunity. And if I want to calculate the unit cost for both options, for example, if I'm dividing 480 by 20,000 units and dividing by this by 20,000 units, you will see that the cost per unit for the make option is $24, and the cost per unit for the buy option is $23 per unit. 23. Therefore, the buy option is the most economical one. And by this we come to the end of this chapter. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.